For the past decade, a persistent system of political chaos has moved through the Western world, straining historic alliances and disrupting domestic stability. This friction manifests as a series of sudden policy reversals: the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement, the termination of ties with the World Health Organization, and a public questioning of the value of NATO. Operating under America First, this damage concentrates almost exclusively on U.S. institutions and its democratic allies. While the West is battered by volatility, a distinct zone of calm exists elsewhere. Over Moscow and Beijing, the damage vectors disappear entirely, replaced by a stable geopolitical environment. This contrast suggests a coordinated effort rather than a random populist surge. Analysts categorize this pattern as the minimization plan, a long-term Sino-Russian strategy designed to cultivate this exact geopolitical climate. The origin of the system traces back to the late 1980s. Donald Trump's early engagement with Russian interests began when his real estate empire faced a critical liquidity crisis. In the 1990s and 2000s, as mainstream Western banks stopped lending to him, his business empire became increasingly dependent on opaque capital flows from the former Soviet Union. This created what intelligence experts call a sovereignty void. When an individual's financial survival is permanently tied to foreign capital, they lose the ability to act independently of their creditors' interests. This dependency makes traditional espionage efforts, like stealing classified secrets, largely irrelevant. The target's personal and financial preservation is simply tethered to the strategic goals of the foreign power. Over 4 decades, this financial symbiosis hardened into a consistent political alignment. By the time he reached the presidency, his personal financial interests and his public rhetoric were already synchronized with the objectives of the Sino-Russian axis. During the activation phase from 2016 onward, this alignment introduced a constant source of internal disruption into the heart of the Western alliance system. The administration's rhetoric focused on delegitimizing the press, intelligence agencies, and the integrity of elections. These actions systematically erode the shared baseline of truth required for a functioning democracy. This hostility extended to the international stage. Historic alliances became purely transactional, with leaders in France and Germany treated with public disdain, while trade wars fractured the global economic order. The frequent threats to withdraw from NATO or ignore collective security obligations broke the trust that underpins the post-World War II international order. This is the mechanism of strategic exhaustion. When a society is forced to constantly defend its foundational institutions from its own leadership, it becomes too fractured to project strength or maintain global leadership. The hostility directed at democratic allies contrasts sharply with the rhetoric reserved for autocratic leaders. Within this eye of the storm, the language shifts to consistent praise. This pattern was visible in the public siding with the Kremlin over U.S. intelligence agencies, and the repeated characterization of Vladimir Putin as savvy and a genius. The same pattern was applied to China. Despite trade war rhetoric, there was consistent praise for President Xi's iron fist and his absolute control over his citizens. This is the multipolar lore. By portraying authoritarian leaders as strong and effective, while framing democratic peers as weak, this rhetoric normalizes autocracy and erodes the ideological foundations of the Western alliance. In the age of information warfare, an ideological traitor is defined by their actions after taking office. They provide aid to the enemy by actively proving the enemy's anti-democratic propaganda correct. This leads to the reputation flip, the primary goal of the minimization plan. By making the United States appear chaotic and unreliable, the strategy permanently damages America's moral authority on the world stage. This strategy effectively turned the West's own open systems and freedoms into a mechanism for its internal decay, triggering a cycle of self-inflicted instability. The exhausting political friction in the daily news is the visible surface of an ongoing theater of foreign warfare. The West will continue to weaken until it recognizes these disruptions as components of a coordinated global plan.